Welcome everyone to Health Coach TV. I'm your host, Dr. Shauna Menard, and I am so excited for this episode. This is something unique that we haven't really covered before, and I'm here with my special guest, Charlotte Hoffman. Welcome, Charlotte.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I'm going to give you a great introduction here, but if you are a chaplain, a member of the clergy, spiritual care provider, someone who's been burned out, tune in. You're going to want to listen up, maybe even grab a pen and paper. You're going to want to take some notes. So Charlotte is an amazing and lovely woman who has helped burned out chaplains and spiritual care providers regain their energy. And after struggling herself for years throughout repeated burnout cycles, ending with multiple health issues, and following a hospital shift schedule and process of deep grief, Charlotte finally found ways to restore her energy in a sustainable, resilient way. We're going to talk a lot about that. She believes resilience is a way of life, not a diet. She outlines simple steps to build sustainable energy and healthy routines in her Restore Resilience programs. Charlotte returned to her roots to live in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois. She is an incredible being, highly intelligent, highly caring, and I am so excited to have you here, Charlotte. I know you're going to share a wealth of experience and wisdom with our guests, so thank you for being here.
Awesome. It's so great to be here. Thanks, Dr. Shauna.
Awesome. So we will just tell us, what is it that you do now, and then we'll dive into a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. So I help chaplains and spiritual care providers who are burned out by the pandemic to regain their energy so they can enjoy work and life again.
Awesome. Now, my audience is broad. There's from all different walks of life. Having worked in the hospital for years, I kind of have an idea about what a chaplain is. Obviously, your following does. But for those who might not know, what is a chaplain?
Yeah, so chaplains, broadly, because they can do different things depending on the setting, which I'll get to, but generally they provide spiritual and emotional support. And that is for people of a variety of faith backgrounds, people who may have no particular faith background. It's about honoring the values and the beliefs of that particular person, and helping to advocate for them. That's how I was trained. In chaplains, sometimes you'll hear them called spiritual care providers or something else, but they can work in healthcare. You'll hear me speak more to that, just because that's more of the clients I've had, more of where I have had personal experience. But healthcare, hospice, military, universities, police and fire chaplains, even disaster response, who go right along with Red Cross or other organizations you may know, to provide that support to folks in disaster zones. So that's just a tiny taste, but chaplains really provide support in so many great ways in so many different places.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever heard the word probably was or knew about that was watching MASH, the TV show years ago, and then having worked for decades in the hospital. Yeah, that's where I really got to know chaplains. And what I know is they're, from my perspective, from my non-chaplain perspective, they're on the front lines. They're on the front lines of spiritual care and health, and when things are in a crisis, when things have come to a head, in the most challenging of circumstances, that's where they are. And maybe one could say that's all of those, but that's where I got to know them, and that's where my job intersected with their job. And so this is a incredible group of people who do an extremely challenging career at fulfilling a calling, and yet so many people don't even know what they do. They don't really get their due respect potentially, but then who takes care of them? So where did they go? The buck stops here. So where did they go? So they take on all this trauma, and then where do they go? So let's rewind a little bit and kind of look into this. What had you get into this line of work in the beginning?
Yeah, so my burnout story is also really my resilience story. I had just finished my year-long chaplain residency, was getting ready to start another job, but I absolutely panicked because after a year of a rotating shift schedule, my body just did not know when to go to sleep, when to wake up. And that would have been challenging, but probably manageable health wise. But you add to that, that was the same year I came out to my family, friends, spiritual leaders, and went through a very profound grieving process. And I think that that kind of tipped it over the edge. So at the end of that year, I was an exhausted, semi-functional mess. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to start this next job well. But the bigger problem was when I looked back, I realized this was not the first time this had happened. This is not the first burnout cycle that I had been through. So I kept looking for the root of the problem, right? Why did this keep happening? Because by now I had some lovely health issues coming along with the burnout. Hormones out of whack. I think I was pre-diabetic at that point, low energy, sugar cravings, dairy cravings, brain fog, food intolerances, a really unhappy gut. And I tried different diets and they would work for a while. I'd get my energy back, but as we'll share a little bit more later, it's not always sustainable to do that. I'd get into healthy routines at the gym or walking with friends only to lose them if I moved to a new place or went through a stressful time. And I learned that unfortunately, fatigue and mediocre health are far too common, which is ironic because in healthcare, poor health can be really common. It wasn't just me. And I learned that I could get my energy back, but that staying out of that burnout cycle, like it's one thing to get out of the burnout cycle, but to then not go back into it to sustain that kind of takes a different set of habits and tools. They're a lot smaller and easier than I expected, but they make a huge difference in the long run. So now I know what drains my energy. And with that knowledge, I can manage those things where necessary, change them when possible. And my energy is a renewable resource. I have fun, handy tools whenever I need a boost.
Yeah, it's important, to recognize patterns. And I think we'll dive into in a little bit. A lot of times we're waiting for the situation to change. And I know, having been a medical doctor for over 25 years, back then, it's been years since I was working in the hospital. Back then, I'm like, it can't get any worse. And it is. And I remember the whole time thinking, well, it was always going to get better. Like it would just get through this and it will get better. And it just kept getting worse. So waiting for the situation to change in order for us to look at, well, that's not going to approach it. And you can come up with these short-term solutions, as you were saying, but then we need something more sustainable, which is why I know that you love the word resilience, and it's kind of the core of everything that you talk about, so that you can navigate these crazy waters, which you've done so expertly. I can't wait for our listeners to hear, the tremendous difference. This is a life-changing, life-saving difference here that you're making. So that's an incredible story. You finally broke free of that cycle, which most people don't.
And it's so hard, Dr. Shauna, because when you need your energy back, you don't have the energy to like overhaul your entire life. That's what I think a lot of times when people go to make changes and try to find out what they should do, like that just can feel like a weight landing on you. Like, how am I supposed to do all this stuff? I don't even have the energy to just do my basic daily life.
Yeah. Well, let's dive. I mean, you went from sort of, you were able to break free of that. So let's dive into it deeper. Tell us more about, this. How did you do that? What was it like before? Tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like, because you learned a lot the hard way. Now you're trying to help people like not learn it the hard way. Tell us a little bit about what that was like, or what happened.
Yes, I learned it the hard way over and over again until I finally got it. It started with being desperate in the moment, right? With finishing that residency year, being about to start a new job in 3 weeks, and I had to get it together to do that job. That's what really gave me that urgency to solve things right then. I did not have the luxury of waiting. I was lucky to have 3 weeks off between jobs to do some stuff.
Yeah.
And you heard me share some of the things I was experiencing, right? Not being able to focus, brain fog, not sleeping well, massive sugar cravings, hormones out of whack, being pre-diabetic, PCOS, digestive issues. So I had to do something. That's a long list. But as I said, the real underlying problem is that I could think of probably at least 3 times that I had been through something like this in my adult life, where my energy was so low that I found it hard just to get through the day. It wouldn't matter how much I slept. I was still tired. One of, as you asked me to reflect on this, I realized one of the worst burnout cycles I'd been through earlier, I was so tired, and I can picture this in my brain. I emptied the dishwasher. So like 10 minutes of putting away clean dishes, and I was so tired I had to go lie down. That's just scary. That's scary. As I look back now, it's unbelievable to me that I managed to live that way. And I'm so glad to be on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a lot of people, chaplains and others, who are running on empty, like running on fumes like that, like, and they kind of give it all at the office, if you like, and then when they come home, their tank is empty, and they don't have an opportunity to replenish it before they got to give it again, and it gets way out of whack, as you're saying. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, and that you literally said exactly what I was about to say, is that I certainly have witnessed times where people can manage to show up, maybe on the surface, if you didn't know that person, you'd think everything was fine.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing them when they get home.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because that's, those are relationships we care about, relaxation time, values, hobbies. So that matters. So how did I go from not being able to empty the dishwasher to looking back going, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about, I'm so far from that, I didn't think about that till I kind of was reflecting for our time together today. Well, I discovered some things in my journeys. It really takes a holistic approach to get out of burnout and stop the burnout cycle for good. Basic wellness advice, like, you can find that anywhere. A lot of chaplains I know already have lots of tools in their toolbox, right? So somewhere there's a gap. And there are certainly some things I've noticed in myself and in my work with clients that make some of the biggest positive difference. First of all, it doesn't matter how many tools you have if you don't use them. For me, the gap between knowing and doing was where I got tripped up over and over again. Part of what helps with that is making sure healthy habits work for real life. You and I have talked, Dr. Shauna, being on call in the ER at 3 o'clock in the morning, a massage and a bubble bath are not helpful. Not helpful. What do you do at that time, right? Yeah. That's actually useful. And of course, for me, also having the support and the accountability to then follow through on those things was very helpful. Second, sometimes you just need new tools. Speaking for myself, working in healthcare in a pandemic, I had to use every tool I knew of and find new ones to help me through. And I hear that from a lot of chaplains I talk to. What do you do when you've tried everything you know and nothing's working anymore? So sometimes you just need new tools. And then finally, one of the key ingredients that was missing for me before was fun, right? To feel better years ago, I did some things that were not fun. Restrictive elimination diets for months at a time, not being able to eat out, being regimented with my sleep. That's just not sustainable. Yeah. And so focusing on my health used to feel really stressful. Yeah. And ironic. I know. So now it's fun and I don't have to go to such extremes. I have a variety of tools, so it's easy to grab something to do something when I need a boost, whether that's a, physical, emotional, spiritual boost that I might need. I keep discovering new things and I love sharing those with clients. That's what keeps it fun and fresh. And to list some specific good things as well, some concrete benefits of where I am now is better focus, fewer sugar cravings. I feel a lot more connected with my body instead of just being in my head, right? Get that sort of feedback from my body on what I need before it gets too far along. I sleep well, my mood is better, my digestion is a lot better, and of course my energy is sustainable as well.
That's awesome. So your transformation from going in these repeated burnout cycles, realizing the hospital situation is not going to change, so that's going to keep going. So and going, I can't take this anymore. It can't keep going like this. And then you realize that, okay, if I'm just to know what to do and not do it's not helpful. So I have to do something that's sustainable, that's fun, that I can do every day, these little baby steps every day, and have some tools in my toolkit that work for real life, for chaplains, for people who are in the middle of the night, so some stuff that works for that type of person doing call and night shifts and dealing with some really significant stressors. So you had to figure that out, and then you did that, and then it's like, wow, I can navigate this. I'm navigating these waters. The work is still challenging and rewarding. That's why we do it. But the work is still challenging, but I'm thriving now. Like I can enjoy life and serve in this way. So is that why you decided to become a health coach? Is that what you're like, hey, I want to help people with this, or what happened?
Well, since the very beginning, so in my tradition, we talk about a sense of call. So I've always felt called to support spiritual leaders. So this is something that's been kind of threaded through for a while, but I never imagined it would take the shape of being a health coach. So my dog she just sneezed. She's like, yeah, I couldn't see that one coming.
On the truth, yeah.
So I think healing from my own burnout and then discovering what helped me really planted a seed. I realized, gosh, I've got this strong philosophy of coaching from my own journey that people should feel heard and empowered. And that's a really key thing to success. So I kind of had that seed planted. And then I found out about the Institute for Integrative Nutrition's health coach training program, started that in 2019, graduated in 2020, 2 months before the pandemic started. Loved what I learned, but wasn't necessarily thinking about coaching right then. And then with fall coming that year, with lockdowns looming where I live, knowing I wasn't going to get home to see my family for the holidays, I signed up for an Ayurvedic wellness counselor course just to give myself something fun and exciting to focus on. And that just expanded everything I thought I knew about burnout. I would say the tipping point into active coaching happened when I continued to work in healthcare during the pandemic. Over and over again, I saw the toll that it took on individual staff and on the ways that we were able to work together as a team and how we were challenged in that with folks being burned out. So with my own healing from burnout and with my health coach lens, I saw ways that even in the midst of the pandemic, things could be better. Staff didn't have to suffer as much from burnout. There were easy, simple things that they could do right now to have more energy, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual.
Yeah, I think, I just want to echo what you had just said, like even in the midst of a pandemic. So now you're coming at it from a different lens, as you say, your health coach lens. And I love this marriage between health coaching and clergy, spiritual care, chaplains. I love that. And where the intersection of how this health coach can help these people who are really burned out. And really, is an underserved population. I'm always looking at who's the underserved population, and these people are underserved because they're the servers, they're the caregivers, and this is a need that is not really being addressed or fulfilled.
Yeah.
Kind of like keeping on going because they're so busy dealing with that crisis.
Mhm.
No one else refilling their or helping to refill their bucket, or they just kind of have to think it's that way. But now you, having had, the timing was perfect, having gone through these repeated bouts of burnout, figuring out a way to have sustainable change, practical change. Now, even in the midst of a pandemic, through your health coach lens, you're like, hey, wait a minute. I know the situation is just ramped up a whole whack, but there are things that you can do. You don't actually need to suffer like you're suffering. I get how you're suffering because I used to too. I get how you're suffering. I get how this can take you out of the game. But there are actually things that I know that could actually help these people. And I think that's kind of where you and I, met, where we're kind of like, there's things that you can offer to these people that would be of tremendous value to them so that they can be sustainable, so that they can be nourished, so they can be resilient, as you say, your word, resilient. So I love that. Yeah. So that's, and that really is kind of your, well, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, that's when I started reaching out. So I thought of one thing as you were talking, I think we'll touch on this later, but I think because of that nature of serving, because when I talk to people, there's so much like they're having to piecemeal it. Have a therapist, have a spiritual director, have their doctor try to help them figure out what's going on. Maybe if they're really lucky and they have the time and the money, a personal trainer or a nutritionist, but like having to try to piecemeal something, and that takes a lot of energy. You don't necessarily have people that understand what you do. So yeah, so that's that point where I started going, oh my gosh, this is a terrible situation, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It can be better even in the midst. That's when I started reaching out to people and actively sharing this mission of resilience. That's what led to giving workshops, coaching clients. The rest is history. It's just something I'm very passionate about.
Awesome. That's really, because the people that are burned out, they don't have the energy to get the time to get the energy and the time. So they're kind of caught, which is what keeps them in that cycle. And so, to be able to put it in a container that, well, we'll talk a little bit, how can you help them? Like, what would you be able to do? We'll talk about that. But I think that's really powerful. And you mentioned about, like, going to doctors and this and that. The thing is, so you take somebody, I'm taken back to where you said you were unloading the dishwasher, and like that just kind of did you in, like you didn't even have energy for that. You needed to take a nap. And after just that kind of exertion, it was that level of burnout. But that same person, you go to the doctor because like, this can't be normal. And they're like, yeah, nothing wrong with you.
Your thyroid's fine.
Yeah. So then what do you do? So like that's, to me, this is really the role of a health coach, because your hemoglobin might be fine. It might not be, but it could be fine. This could be fine. This could be fine. And they're like, you don't have there's nothing really that we can do. So, but you're like, so they're like, you're normal. And you're like, is this not normal? I shouldn't be able to do that. And I think millions of people are in that, where they're like, something's up here. I have some funny symptoms, or I'm not functioning. This can't be normal, but there's not necessarily a disease. Sometimes there can be, and there's spin-offs. You keep going long enough, there'll be a label that we can attach to this, whether it's diabetes or whatever. There'll be a label that will get attached for sure, heart disease, stroke, etc. But in those early stages, there's not, and so they don't know where to go. And so that's why I love health coaches. That's why we do Health Coach TV. So tell us, how is it that you like work with people? What is it that you do?
Yeah, and I hope you don't mind me adding one thing that I thought of while you were chatting just now. I think is that spiritual dimension that comes with chaplaincy. So it's not just that health piece. It's what do you do with the emotions and the physical things and the spiritual things that you might be feeling when you walk out of a trauma situation, or you have a difficult death, like,
Yeah.
a doctor's probably not going to help you figure out how to process that
Yeah.
in your body, in your spirit, in your emotions. And I think for folks who are providing spiritual care, that is just as important a dimension in health.
Absolutely.
So that's something I always think about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important. And I'll let you continue. So how do you work with those? Because that is important, because that is actually what leads to those labels and
Exactly.
diagnoses and things for themselves, because they're taking it on from other people, and then where do you leave it? I know I had my own, as a doctor, dealing with some of these difficult things, and then that, I was told you leave it at the door. Some stuff is big. I can't leave it at the door. It's replaying in my mind what I just saw, what I just witnessed, what I was just a part of. I can't leave it at the door.
What do you do when you go home at night and you can't sleep?
Yeah. So then what? And so okay. So what is it that you do? How do you help these amazing clients of yours?
Yeah, so most of my clients are chaplains or spiritual care providers who are burned out by the pandemic. They want to get their energy back, be able to enjoy work again, and have a life outside of work as well. They're professionals, they're savvy, they're self-aware, and they've kind of heard it all when it comes to self-care, right? We talked earlier about, massage and a bubble bath. Well, those are fine suggestions, but not really helpful on call in the ER at 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for something different, for some new tools. So I walk them step by step through a program from where they are now. So exhausted, overwhelmed, struggling with cravings, angry, stressed out, to where they want to be. So more energy, better mood, having fun ways to release stress, and with lots of good habits and tools that are there to support them whenever they need something for whatever might come up in life. So I work with folks really closely, mostly virtually, so it's easy for anyone, anywhere. My clients right now are literally East Coast and West Coast, and I am in the Midwest. So it's great to be able to support people no matter where they're located. There's plenty of accountability and support, but they also know exactly what they need to do to get on the other side of this. The most important thing is that we get some results, and I'll share some befores and afters a little bit later on. But we customize everything. That's, we've talked already, Dr. Shauna. The greatest tool in the world is absolutely useless if it doesn't fit your real life.
Right.
You should know exactly how it's going to fit within your day, how it's going to flow within your week, and it should be fun.
Right. Yeah. And everybody has a different idea of what's fun. And so that has to be customized too. So yeah, it's not just that you think it's fun, they have to think it's fun.
Right.
That's the key thing. Yeah. What's the biggest myth that you see when it comes to spiritual care providers, chaplains, and trying to overcome burnout or dealing with burnout? What are some of the biggest? I like to always, when I'm interviewing people, you have an inside scoop on this, and sometimes these myths are what are perpetuating the problem. So what do you see as the biggest myth?
Yeah, maybe this, that you can't get over it. I think there's this sense that some external circumstance has to change in order to make resilience possible. On the one hand, I think it's super important to acknowledge the systemic issues that contribute to burnout. I'll name just a couple. So with the pandemic, for a lot of chaplains I know, there are issues maybe in the healthcare system they work, or in the broader healthcare system in the US, that are contributing to some of those systemic challenges. A lot of those issues preceded the pandemic.
Yeah.
I see this in congregational spiritual leaders as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't also address systemic injustice and exclusion as a huge part of this, and how they disproportionately impact specific groups and individuals. That just has to be acknowledged. But what do you do? How can you survive and thrive, even as you're working in those systems, working to change those systems? And that's when I hear people start to share where these challenges touch down in their individual lives. And I hear sometimes a focus on the barriers that they see in their way. So when such and such changes, I'll focus on myself, on my health, on my well-being. So when I get more staff, when my family situation changes, when I don't have to take so many on-call shifts, when the pandemic is finally over, because for a lot of chaplains, it's not over. When our hospital system or administration finally appreciates chaplains, when I have more time, whatever it is, but oftentimes that's when you need resilience the most.
And it pushes it off to a someday that never comes.
Right. So when I hear those challenges, I think there's this myth that getting over burnout has to feel as heavy and difficult as what got you there in the first place.
Right.
And that's just not true. I don't see that with my clients. I'll just give you a couple examples. So when I work with clients, oftentimes we're working with something that's been a recurring challenge for them for like 6 months, a couple years, sometimes decades. And over again, they're pleasantly surprised how fun and easy it can feel to release these things. I hear clients say over and over, oh, you don't have to get up at 3 a.m. and go meditate on a rock. Like, this feels manageable. This feels doable. That sounds like fun. I'm excited to try it. And they can already see how they're going to fit a practice into their week. They genuinely look forward to it. And that makes all the difference. I think if more people knew how fun it could be to get over burnout, they wouldn't wait to start.
Or that it's possible. I think you're right. I think if people don't think it's possible, why would they even bother to try?
It's the water everybody's swimming in.
And if you know it's possible, well then that's worth focusing on, because it is worth getting on the other side of. Why is resilience so important? I've just got like a couple of last, quick questions here. Well, maybe not so quick, but I just want to be mindful. But why is resilience so important? I mean, that's kind of an obvious question, but why do you feel that that's kind of at the core? Because I know that's a core of your mission, is resilience. Tell us a little bit about that.
Gosh, we could really spend an hour on this. What's interesting to me is just the lack of statistics when it comes to burnout among chaplains and spiritual care providers. They're out there, but it's not as easy to find. For example, you can find lots of statistics about burnout among the general US population. The Great Resignation has made headlines for a year now. And there's been a lot of focus on burnout among frontline healthcare workers like doctors and nurses, deservedly so. All of that is really important, but it misses the fact that chaplains are often right there in those same frontline healthcare situations. They are frontline healthcare workers, yet it's challenging to find stories and statistics about chaplains. Yet they're experiencing oftentimes the same energy drains, the same pandemic-related trauma, the same staffing shortages as other departments. And here's just one example of how this can play out when it comes to statistics. So this quote comes from the Journal of Pastoral Care and Counseling in March of 2021, talking about chaplains. Quote, in the qualitative data, the use of the phrase self-care in over half of the instances was associated with chaplains facilitating self-care activities for staff, not with chaplains' own self-care activities, unquote. So that speaks to chaplains supporting staff in those same situations that they're going through. And to find other burnout statistics, I actually had to go over to a Barna Group study from November of 2021. It's actually a study of Protestant pastors in congregational settings, but I see a lot of these themes carry over to chaplains as well. This study pointed out that 38% of pastors reported thinking about quitting in the past year. When you look at pastors under age 45, 46%, so almost half, had thought about quitting. The real kicker, though, despite those high numbers, is this was not a one-time study. They had done this over multiple years. And the folks doing the study had noticed back in 2017, years before the pandemic ever even happened, they noticed widespread burnout. And I want to highlight too, for a lot of the spiritual care providers and the chaplains I know, this is not just a job. It's not just, I'll quit this and I'll go do something else. It's a vocation. It's a calling. It's an identity. The stakes are higher. And I hear too, over and over again, that chaplains and spiritual care providers are misunderstood. I certainly know ones who get a lot of respect and are looked to in the leadership of their organizations, but just as often, or even in those same organizations, that misunderstanding can also happen. So a lot of people don't understand or haven't had the experience of attending a death or multiple deaths while on call overnight, going home, eating breakfast, changing clothes, and going back to work at the hospital for the day. That's just not something most people experience. And it's deep emotional, spiritual work to walk with people through experiences like that on a regular basis. It takes skill, it takes energy, yet it's often unseen and overlooked. And I will never forget my CPE supervisor that I had worked with during my residency year invited me back to speak during Spiritual Care Week to the department. And at the end of the workshop, she had tears in her eyes and she said, I've been a practicing chaplain for almost 20 years. And I believe that this is the first time I have ever heard anyone address the unique health needs of chaplains. I still get chills. And she is not the only person to say that. I mean, seasoned professionals who say nobody's ever talked about anything like this before. No one should have to wait 20 years to hear that their health and well-being matter. Chaplains and spiritual care providers deserve better. They deserve the best, to be heard and valued, to have the support they need to be resilient, and to be able to enjoy work and life.
Yeah. So I think that was awesome, Charlotte. I think what you're saying is this is a huge problem that's gone unnoticed for decades, and it's not being addressed. And you can see how it's eroding at the very foundation of this group of amazing people, and it's not sustainable. And you know, if half of them are ready to throw in the towel, and a lot of people are these days, but you can see how it was shaky. And as you say, when it's their calling and not just, you know, a job to them, they'll just get to do a different thing. It's a lot. And even if they did get another job, you still got all of the stuff, the lingering trauma that from those.
Yeah. And I think even worse, sorry to interrupt, but I want to add, like, even worse, when it is acknowledged and when it is addressed, it's often that have a massage and a bubble bath. Never mind that you just did this thing that you can't go tell people about because of confidentiality that you're going to be thinking about for the entire rest of the week, but go have a massage or a bubble bath. It's superficial, which makes people then not even want to go there because that kind of self-care is just not helpful. So that's almost even worse. Not talking about it.
So there's a huge problem. We've addressed that. We've really dived into that. Now, we can't leave everybody in the depths of despair. We spent way too much time on that, but since it's not recognized or acknowledged, that's an important thing. But there is hope, and you provide that. So what are some things that people who are listening that are finding themselves in this situation? So what is it that they can do to help improve their resilience? What are some things that you can share? You said some of it's not so difficult. So what is it? Give us some ideas.
Yeah, I'll share two of my favorite things. So one is just to walk 100 steps after meals, especially lunch and dinner. It's so easy to do. It's a flexible practice that you can adapt to work for your body, for your setting, and even for your schedule. And according to the tradition of Ayurveda, this helps support good digestion It helps avoid that kind of after lunch slump or energy crash that can happen. And if you think it's too simple, walking is actually scientifically proven to be beneficial. In his book, Eat, Move, Sleep, Tom Rath writes, quote, "In experimental settings, even 2 minutes, just 2 minutes of leisurely walking every 20 minutes was enough to stabilize blood sugar levels."
Yeah, yeah.
And so another favorite of mine is knowing your dosha. And we don't have time to dive into this, really here, but I wanted to give you all a taste. So this notion of dosha also comes from Ayurveda. So the traditional medicine of India, over 5,000 years old. And it's one of the core things. You can think of it about as a bioenergy, right? And just to give a taste, imagine that each of us is born with this bioenergetic pie. Everyone's pie has 3 slices, but the size of each slice, how they are in combination, is different for each of us. So Dr. Shauna, yours will be different from mine, will be different from the people watching this. And in Ayurveda, if you know your dosha and you're able to maintain the balance of that, that's what will support health and well-being. So to use an image that a lot of chaplains might be familiar with, think of assessments that you know, like Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder or the Enneagram, all of which I love. But knowing your dosha goes even broader and deeper, right? So when I found out my dosha, not only did I learn some of my communication tendencies and the way that I like to work, but it also told me why I have a sweet tooth. And it was so freeing to know, oh, it's not just me. This is just part of my natural makeup. And now that I know that, I also have easy ways to help balance that. Because as you know, Dr. Shauna, sugar is one of those things that can tip the scale towards burnout as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of like, so for anybody who's brand new to it, and yes, you speak a lot on that. We'll touch on that elsewhere if people want to learn more about that. But there's kind of like 3 types: Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And so, you get your fiery Pittas, and people that are like that. But when you get out of balance, the great thing is they're driven, they get things done, they're great leaders. But when they get out of the balance, they get an angry edge. So those spicy foods, maybe not so much. Maybe they need some cooling effect and that sort of thing. And we have the kaphas, the workhorse, the loyal people. But when they get out of balance, they kind of get withdrawn and depressed and sort of stuck in the mud type of thing. And then there's the vadas, those they eat like a bird, they kind of flit around, they're like, light, but when they got out of balance, a little bit nervous and anxiety. So you kind of get an idea of, it's kind of like Charlotte was saying, like these personality types, but there's different foods, different times of day, different activities that support the different doshas. And that's something that you dive in extremely well. And that really shortcuts it. That's one of the reasons why you're getting results now that are sustainable, because you're working with your dosha and your personality and your innate tendencies rather than at crossroads.
Right. And understanding the complexity, because unfortunately, the tendency is to want to go Google it. And I literally, the Ayurvedic doctor that trained me, she said this week, there's so little helpful information out there because it doesn't capture what it needs to that will actually be helpful for people. So that's where the nuance comes into. And I, like I said, we don't have time to dive in, but I wanted to mention it because it can be so transformational to know this, and know your uniqueness. It just, like I said, it changed everything for me, and it certainly helps clients as well.
Yeah. And I think that is, and it's important to say, like, it's not just like a personality test or something like that. Like there are and it's anchored in this 5,000-year-old tradition. So I'm just going to skip over to what are some of the benefits that you've seen? You get them, you help people get over burnout. And then what other things change for them? What other, when you've worked with clients, just share some examples of what does this look like? Where do people go from where they are to where they want to be? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so many cool things. They really love having new tools, especially since they usually come to me having exhausted all the wellness resources that they know of. It sounds too simple, but the things we work on are easy to implement. So they'll reach for them in the midst of their everyday life. And because they're using those things, they're sleeping better and having more energy, have easier ways to fit physical movement right into their days. Sometimes they say they've got less physical pain, like joint pain, or that their clothes are fitting better. Maybe they've lost some weight if that's something that's important to them. Reduced stress. I could go on. And a transformed mindset. One of my clients who finished working with me over a year ago shared that they still use the things that we worked on together, and that their mindset has forever been transformed positively because of that. I really think that speaks to this true transformation into resilience. And then I wanted to kind of wrap up with one other story from a client of mine. She said I could share her story, and I've anonymized it here, but everything I'm about to describe is stuff that's real, that has actually happened to her. So during her work together, she has faced multiple family caregiving situations, challenging on-call shifts with very little sleep, the whole household getting sick at once, a reduction in staff for the summer, not having volunteers to back up on-call shifts. I mean, that's a lot in the span of just 2 or 3 months, especially when you're coming off of 2 years of a pandemic.
Mhm.
But she hasn't let any of this stop her. She's had every excuse to give up, yet she's been resilient and used the tools from the program and not gone back to old habits that led to burnout before. And she said that. She said, I absolutely know I would have gone back to old habits
Yeah.
if we weren't working together. And she described it to me this way. She said, if not now, when? And then she used this amazing image. She said, this isn't a test drive anymore. I'm off-road in a four-wheeler and it's bumpy. And my four-wheel drive works.
Yeah.
Four-wheel drive works. So
Yeah.
she wanted to share her story here so that others could hear that resilience working in real life, like that's possible. It works and it's real transformation.
That's so fantastic. So even if the external situations can't change, because people might be going, well, that's really great, but I still am. No, these are people still having to deal with all the stuff that's going on, but and navigate off-roading and all of the crazy terrain that everybody's really been in, but this is a particular challenging situation. But to have your four-wheel drive work so that you can be resilient,
Mhm.
you can keep on moving, keep doing what you're wanting to do without having it take you out and really sideline you so that you're ineffective and not not living the life you wanted to live. These people wanted to serve, but not at the expense of themselves, and nor should they. So this has been absolutely wonderful, Charlotte. Thank you for sharing, really bringing awareness to this problem. I don't think it goes recognized as a problem, and you really are at the forefront of this, a champion for chaplains and spiritual care providers, helping them become resilient, because we need those people now more than ever, and so that they can do what they love and want to do without it, really having them pay the ultimate price, and so that we don't have half of them quitting, because then where are we at? So how can people connect with you? I know that you have a free starter kit that you provide for people, and I know that you also like to just connect with people and find out where they're at. I know you do you're asked to speak to a lot. If you're somebody who has an association, you're looking for a speaker, she does a lot of talks on burnout. She gets people doing all sorts of breathing techniques and some really great things, and really where she has time to dive into some of those more practical things. But if you how can people reach you if they either want you to speak or if they want to just chat and say, okay, well, that's great, but look at my situation, what would you do with this? How can they reach you?
Sure. So you can go to my website, resiliencehealthsolutions.com. That's resiliencehealthsolutions.com. The free way out of burnout starter kit is there, but it's also super easy to book a time to chat, ask any questions you have, share what resonated with you, or if you're curious to know more about your dosha and how that might play into strengths or potential pitfalls when it comes to burnout. It's just a fun chance to chat, and I'm happy to hear what your needs are and help point folks in the right direction for some best next steps and ways to get energy back and be able to enjoy work and life again.
Awesome. Awesome, Charlotte. I'm going to just spell that out in case this is ever on audio without video. We'll have a link below where it's applicable, but resilience is RESILIE. I feel like this is a spelling bee. Let me start again. RESILIENCE health, HEALTH, solutions, plural, SOLUTIONS.com, resiliencehealthsolutions.com. And so that's how you can connect with her. It's been an absolute pleasure, Charlotte. I just wish you absolutely all the best. I know the tremendous and powerful work that you're doing for this really important community. So keep shining your light, keep doing what you're doing. We really, really appreciate you. You've cracked the code on something that was such a neglected area, and love you for that. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Shauna. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.